Hello, everybody. Welcome to my podcast. In the buckets of love, unfortunately, there will be a bucket called the abuse bucket. And I know this is a pretty nasty bucket to talk about, but I think it's really, really important. All of us are capable of being abusive. We have it in our genes and we've learned it from our families. Even the media teaches us how to be abusive to other people. So there will probably, in your relationship, be some kind of abuse, either with you or them or both of you. And I really think this is a bucket you really need to look at carefully, because abuse will eventually sour and destroy your relationship. There can be many forms of abuse. Remember that abuse is all about power. It's all about power and control, and the other person wanting to get their own way. That's why they're doing that. They try to disempower you. The form of abuse that you are doing to another person is to disempower them, and if they're doing it to you, it's to disempower you. And this is really, really bad in a relationship, because your relationship should all be about building up each other's personal power, empowering the other person, making the other person feel better, building up their self-esteem, encouraging the other person. However, in real life, it's not always the case. And I just want to quickly go through the different types of abuse you might be either doing or at the end of, so you can be clear about it. One of the most clear ones is verbal abuse. It's the way the person will speak to you. They will speak down to you. They will swear at you. They will attack you verbally. They will scream and call you names. They will be nasty to you. And verbal abuse is very, very powerful if we verbally abuse someone, because we can shut them down. We learnt it from our parents probably, because they would do it when they wanted us to do what we were told. And it's a form of bullying. People will do it at home, but they'll also do it out in public. You'll see it by the way a person will speak to another person. Verbal abuse is very powerful, and it really shuts everyone down who's being verbally abused. You will often find people do a really interesting, another version of verbal abuse when they won't answer you. It's a kind of a control power thing. It's not that they're speaking, it's that they're not speaking, and they ignore you and treat like you are invisible. And they will do that in a weird way by not talking to you. And then this crosses into the next one, which is emotional abuse. I think emotional abuse is really hard to understand, but the simplest way is when they hurt your feelings. When they hurt your feelings and don't care about how you feel. And it can be really simple things, like something they say to you, or the way they treat you, or the fact that they don't care about your feelings when they're making decisions or doing things. You will never feel special when you're emotionally abused. And people who are emotionally abusive withhold love. They will always withhold love. That's how they emotionally abuse you. They won't give it to you. So if you want something, they won't give it to you, and they will be emotionally abusive to you. And this, of course, now affects you mentally, because mental abuse is, they question what you think. They make fun of what you think and your ideas. They might even try to make out like you're nuts or you're crazy, or, you're unstable, especially when you're getting close to the truth. If ever you're getting close to the truth with an abusive person, they will always tell you you're unstable and try and gaslight you. So be very clear about that just because they say you're unstable, it might be you're actually because you're just telling the truth and they don't like the truth. So they will mess with your mind, and that's what mental abuse is. They mess with your mind and tell you they didn't say things when they did say things, and tell you the story, change the story, and all of a sudden your memory of the story is completely different to their recall of the story now, and that's the mental one. Psychologically, I think it's a mixture of the emotional and the mental one. They just mess with you, really, and psychologically mess you up. The other one is sexual abuse, and sexual abuse can come in two forms. They can be sexually abusive in the sense that they will tell you you're fat and you don't look good and you're unattractive, and they don't like this or that about you, about your sexuality, you're no good in bed, etc., etc. And they will also be sexually abusive to you, wanting to have sex when you don't feel like it, forcing you to do things you don't want to do, putting you in sexual situations you're really uncomfortable with, and making you feel like you have to do that because you're the partner. They can make you feel that you aren't good enough, and mess with you in that way. And sexual abuse can happen within partnerships. It's not just happening in people's childhoods, it can actually happen in their adult life. And you might want to look at this. You don't have to do anything sexually that you don't feel comfortable with. End of story. And if they're forcing you or blackmailing you or guilt tripping you into it, then you might have to have a look at that one, because that's actually really quite a powerful one in this bucket. So these are the main ones that I think we deal with. Of course, the saddest one is the physical abuse. You can start off really slowly. You start the relationship and they just give you a little slap or they give you a little push, and then it can escalate. And if you're in a physically abusive relationship, you really need to get out or get help. And it'll be gradual. And sometimes it'll also happen when you least expect it, like the person will be all loving and kind and wonderful, and then all of a sudden smack you across the face. This is a very dangerous one because your safety is actually at risk, and if you have children, the children's safety is at risk as well. So you might want to have a look at this one. There are many forms of abuse, and people will use a variety of them. People who are the smartest, most manipulative abusers don't usually leave a mark, and they will do things that are untraceable, but they will still work you. They are bullies. Abusers are bullies, and they are, in my opinion, the people in the world who love the least. Because if you love someone, you don't abuse them. End of story. So when you're abusing them, there's no love there. You will find they also come from power and control. They don't come from love. And if you started off in a love relationship with them, you will find that changes very, very quickly as soon as they start becoming abusive towards you. It's easy to see the physical, the sexual, and hear the verbal abuse. However, the emotional, mental, and psychological abuse is harder to see. And it's actually harder to recognise when you're in it, because they groom you and they just do it bit by bit. And before you know, you're in this abusive relationship. There's not a mark on you, but they've actually broken your spirit and they've broken your heart. I really don't think we should have relationships where we live with abusers. However, the world is full of abuse. There will be abuse within families, within friendships, at work. It's rife, it's everywhere. And the only thing you can do is stand up to it. If your partner is abusive towards you, you need to fix this bucket, because they need to get a handle on it and stop doing it. They're just being a bully and wanting their own way. And you need to get them to stop. And if you love that person and they love you, this is not a form of love, and you can talk to them about it. If you are the abuser, you need to stop. There are other ways to come to a conclusion with things. There's other ways to fix it. You don't have to be abusive. You can sit down and talk. You can go to counselling. You can work out a better way to do it. I think it's really disappointing and sad when you are first so in love and you're so loving and kind to one another, and the abuse starts to seep into the relationship. Often the person who is abusive has come out of it. They've learned it from a parent or both parents. However, that's no excuse, because if you're at the end of it, you should know never to do it again. I don't see that as an excuse. I see it as a reason why you're like that, because to be abusive to someone is a choice that you make, and in that choice you are being unloving and unkind, and you're going to eventually wreck that relationship. Because what happens is the person might not be aggressive back to you or fight back, but they will become passively aggressive toward you and resent you, and the whole relationship will not be on a good standing. If you're in an abusive relationship, please get help. You don't need to tell your partner you're getting help, but get help. You really will need it. And if you need to get out of the relationship because it's not safe, get out of the relationship. People make a choice to be abusive. It's not a disease. It's not an addiction. It's a personal choice of how we treat people, and how we behave is a choice that we make. So if they want to be with you, they can choose to treat you well or not be with you. That's how I see it. And you need to pick up your power and make a stand. However, you also need to keep yourself safe, and you know your partner better than anyone else. This is a bucket that when it's full of abuse, your relationship is doomed, really. I really think it's doomed. people live in it and they put up with it, but they usually end up getting sick and dying. They find a way to exit. I've seen a lot of people who in these relationships could not physically move, and they just gave themselves illnesses and they just checked out early. And that's how people do it. They just check out. They can't leave the person physically, so they basically die. They just give up, and they're not so unhappy anyhow that they'd rather be dead than be in this. It's sort of like a social suicide in a sense. Get help if you're in it. Get help for your partner if they're the abuser, and see if you can get rid of the sexual bucket. And instead of having the abuse bucket, then you now have the love bucket. I hope you can get some help with this area, because if you're listening to this, you're obviously been at the end of some kind of abuse. The other thing to consider is if you come out of abuse, you'll actually land up often in abusive relationships because in some way you're kind of used to it and it's comfortable. It sounds strange, but it's a place you've been in, and so you're comfortable in it, and you might love that person and want it to work. While you're doing this, get help for yourself. If you come out of abuse, I think you might need to get some help for yourself, whether you go to the doctor or counselling or do any of the modalities that work for you. But the more you address your own abuse, the less vulnerable you will be to abusers, because what you will do is you will stop being a victim of it and you'll become a survivor, and you'll pick up your personal power. And when you do that, you'll say no, and you will be prepared to live without that person, be without those kind of people in your life, and be alone. And because you don't need that in your life, you already have done that, been there, done that. So good, get help for yourself. And I'm hoping you can find a way to eliminate this bucket, basically, or fill it with love and happiness.